I couldn't believe what I was seeing. The scene unfolded in front of me like a cruel nightmare. My husband Leo embraced another woman, his arm wrapped around her waist as they stood together in the hospital lobby. "Sarah, you gave me the greatest gift. Thank you for making me a father," Leo whispered, his voice thick with emotion. I felt sick to my stomach. Sarah, my once best friend, smiled up at him, her eyes shining. "Leo, we've been through a lot. Let's cherish every moment with our son." Tears streamed down my face as I watched them from my hidden vantage, phone recording the devastating scene. How could Leo do this to me? To our marriage? I thought we were happy, but his lies had unraveled our life together. Anger and betrayal burned through me like wildfire. In that moment, I knew my life would never be the same. Leo had to pay for what he'd done. I would make sure of it. As they walked away, oblivious to my presence, I steeled my resolve. No more tears, no more playing the victim. It was time for revenge. I slipped away, mind already racing with possibilities. Leo thought he could deceive me, but he had no idea what I was capable of. I would expose his web of lies, piece by devastating piece, until he lost everything he held dear. This was just the beginning. Leo's world was about to come crashing down around him, all because of his own deceitful actions. And I would be the one to make it happen, no matter what it took. After that night at the hospital, my world shattered into a million pieces. The man I loved, the man I trusted with my heart, had betrayed me in the cruelest way imaginable. But I refused to be the victim anymore. As the days passed, I meticulously planned my next steps. First, I hired a private investigator to gather concrete evidence of Leo's affairs. I needed proof, irrefutable proof that would leave no room for doubt or denial. John Maxwell, a seasoned professional, took on the case. Within weeks, he had compiled a damning file, photos, recordings, even DNA tests confirming Leo's infidelity with multiple women over the years. "Are you sure you want to go through with this, Mrs. Barnes?" John asked, his brow furrowed with concern. This could get ugly. I met his gaze, my resolve unwavering. Leo brought this upon himself. It's time he faced the consequences of his actions. With the evidence in hand, I began organizing a family gathering, inviting our closest relatives to our home under the guise of a casual get-together. Little did they know the truth that awaited them. Leo eyed me suspiciously as our living room filled with people. "Lisa, what's happening? Why are there so many people here?" I forced a smile, my calm exterior masking the storm raging within. "It's family, Leo. They're here for you." His brow creased, confusion etched across his features. But I knew the truth would come out soon enough, and when it did, his world would crumble. As our guests settled in, I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the moment when Leo's lies would be exposed for all to see. "Everyone, thank you for coming," I began, my voice steady and unwavering. "Tonight, we're not just here for a casual gathering. We're here to celebrate new beginnings." Leo's eyes narrowed, suspicion flickering in their depths. But it was too late to turn back now. The truth was about to be unleashed, and there would be no stopping it. As I addressed our gathered family members, Leo's eyes narrowed with suspicion. He could sense that something was amiss, but he couldn't begin to fathom the truth that was about to unfold. "Leo, my dear husband," I said, my voice laced with false sweetness. "Today, we celebrate new beginnings. Sit down. It's important." He hesitated for a moment, searching my face for any hint of what was to come, but I remained impassive, my expression betraying nothing of the storm raging within. Slowly, he lowered himself onto the couch, his gaze flickering between me and our relatives. The tension in the room was palpable, thick enough to cut with a knife. "Lisa, what's going on?" he asked, his brow furrowed with unease. I couldn't help but revel in his discomfort, knowing that the truth would soon shatter his world into pieces. "Patience, Leo," I replied, my tone even and controlled. "All will be revealed in due time." As our family watched on in silent confusion, I stepped forward, clutching the file of evidence in my hand. With a flick of my wrist, I scattered the photos across the coffee table, laying bare Leo's betrayal for all to see. Gasps of shock and outrage rippled through the room as the incriminating images came into focus. Leo's face drained of color, his eyes wide with dawning horror. "Leo, how could you?" his mother cried, her voice trembling with disappointment. "How could you do this to Lisa, to our family?" For a moment, Leo seemed to shrink under the weight of their collective judgment, but then his expression hardened, and a flicker of defiance ignited in his eyes. "Lisa, what is the meaning of this?" he demanded, his voice laced with anger. "Are you trying to turn our family against me?" I met his gaze unflinchingly, my own fury burning like a wildfire within. "I'm not the one who turned against our family, Leo. You did that when you decided to betray me with your lies and infidelity." The room fell silent, the weight of my words hanging heavy in the air. Leo's jaw clenched, but he said nothing, his eyes darting from face to face as he took in the collective disgust and disappointment etched onto the features of our loved ones. In that moment, I knew the battle lines had been drawn. Leo's lies had been exposed, and there was no turning back. It was time for him to face the consequences of his actions, no matter how painful or devastating they might be. The room was thick with tension as the damning photos lay scattered across the coffee table. Leo's eyes darted from face to face, taking in the expressions of shock and disgust etched onto the features of our loved ones. "Lisa, how did you find out about this?" my sister Anna asked, her voice trembling with disbelief. "Does everyone know about Leo's affairs?" I turned to her, my gaze unwavering. "I saw him, Anna, at the hospital with his mistress Sarah and their newborn son." A collective gasp rippled through the room, and I saw Leo flinch as if he had been struck. "Is this true, Leo?" his father demanded, his voice shaking with anger. "Have you been carrying on an affair behind Lisa's back?" Leo's shoulders slumped, and for a moment he looked utterly defeated. But then a spark of defiance flared in his eyes, and his jaw clenched stubbornly. "Lisa couldn't give me a child," he spat, his words laced with venom. "If she hadn't been unable to conceive, I wouldn't have needed someone else. This is her fault." A deafening silence fell over the room, broken only by the sound of my mother-in-law's choked sob. I stared at Leo in disbelief, my heart shattering all over again at his cruel words. "How dare you?" my father-in-law growled, his face contorted with rage. "How dare you blame Lisa for your own despicable actions?" He turned to me, his expression softening with regret and sorrow. "Lisa, my dear, please accept our deepest apologies. We had no idea the depths of Leo's betrayal." Tears stung my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not in front of Leo, not after everything he had done. "I loved you, Leo," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I gave you everything, and you threw it all away for a few cheap affairs." Leo opened his mouth as if to speak, but his father cut him off with a sharp gesture. "Enough," he spat. "You've disgraced this family and betrayed the trust of our closest relatives. As of this moment, you are no longer welcome in this house or in our lives." Leo's face drained of color, and he stared at his father in shock. "Dad, you can't mean that. This is my home, my family." "Not anymore," his mother said, her voice trembling but resolute. "You've made your choices, Leo, and now you must live with the consequences." As Leo's protests fell on deaf ears, I couldn't help but feel a twisted sense of satisfaction. After all the pain and heartbreak he had caused, he was finally getting what he deserved. The battle was far from over, but in that moment I knew I had won a crucial victory. Leo's lies had been exposed, and his world was crumbling around him, all because of his own selfish actions. And as I looked around at the faces of my loved ones, I knew that no matter what happened next, I wouldn't be facing it alone. The aftermath of Leo's exposure was like a bomb going off in our family. As the shock waves rippled through the room, he desperately tried to cling to any shred of support or sympathy. "You can't seriously be siding with her," he said, gesturing wildly at me. "After everything we've been through together, you're just going to turn your backs on me?" My father-in-law fixed him with a steely glare. "We're not the ones who turned our backs, Leo. You did that the moment you decided to betray Lisa and this family." Leo's mouth opened and closed like a gasping fish, his eyes darting around the room in search of an ally. But he found none, only the looks of disgust and disappointment etched onto the faces of our loved ones. "You've made your choices, Leo," my mother-in-law said, her voice trembling with barely contained emotion. "And now you must live with the consequences." Leo's gaze finally settled on me, his eyes blazing with a mixture of anger and desperation. "Lisa, please," he pleaded. "We can work through this. We can make it right." I met his gaze, feeling nothing but a hollow emptiness where my love for him had once resided. It's too late for that, Leo. You had your chance, and you threw it away for your selfish desires. He opened his mouth to protest, but I held up a hand, cutting him off. Don't bother. I'm done listening to your lies and excuses. With a sharp nod, I pulled out a thick envelope from my purse and slid it across the coffee table towards him. These are the divorce papers. It's over. Leo's face drained of color as he stared at the envelope, his hands trembling. For a moment, he looked like a broken man, utterly defeated by the weight of his own actions. But then, a spark of defiance flared in his eyes and he lifted his chin defiantly. Fine, he spat. If that's how you want to play it, then so be it, but don't come crawling back to me when you realize your mistake. I couldn't help but let out a bitter laugh at his bravado. Even after everything, he still couldn't bring himself to take responsibility for his actions. Don't worry, Leo, I said, my voice cold and cutting. I have no intention of ever coming back to you. You've made your bed and now you can lie in it, alone. With those words, I turned and walked away, leaving him to face the consequences of his choices. The battle was far from over, but in that moment, I knew that I had won a crucial victory. Leo's lies and betrayal had cost him everything: his family, his home, and ultimately his marriage. And as I stepped out into the night, I couldn't help but feel a sense of grim satisfaction. Karma, it seemed, had finally caught up with Leo Barnes. Just when I thought the night couldn't get any more emotionally charged, the doorbell rang. My heart dropped into my stomach as I exchanged a look with my sister Anna. We both knew who it was. Sure enough, when I opened the door, there stood Sarah, Leo's mistress and the mother of his illegitimate child, cradled in her arms. She looked surprised to see the house filled with our family members, their faces etched with varying degrees of shock and outrage. Lisa, Sarah began, her voice trailing off as she took in the tense atmosphere. Her eyes landed on Leo, hunched over on the couch, and a flicker of concern crossed her features. What's going on? I felt a surge of bitter satisfaction at the confusion written across her face. Little did she know her world was about to come crashing down around her, just as mine had. Sarah, come in, I said, my voice deceptively calm. You're just in time for the main event. She frowned, but stepped inside, her gaze flickering nervously between Leo and the rest of our family. As she passed by me, I caught a whiff of her perfume, the same scent that had lingered on Leo's clothes so many times before. A wave of nausea rolled through me, but I pushed it down, determined to see this through to the bitter end. Leo, I said, addressing him directly, perhaps you'd like to introduce your son to your family. He looked up at me, his eyes wide and panicked, but I held his gaze unflinchingly. Lisa, I can explain, he started, but I cut him off with a sharp shake of my head. Save it, Leo. The truth is out, and there's no more hiding from it. Turning to Sarah, I fixed her with a steely glare. Did you know, Sarah, that Leo has been carrying on affairs with multiple women over the years? That your precious little family was built on a foundation of lies and deceit? Sarah's face drained of color, and she clutched her baby closer to her chest protectively. Leo, is this true? She whispered, her voice trembling. Leo opened his mouth, but no words came out. In that moment, the weight of his betrayal seemed to crush him, leaving him utterly speechless. See for yourself, I said, gesturing to the scattered photographs and evidence that had already torn our family apart. Leo's been lying to us all, you included. Sarah's gaze landed on the damning photos, and a choked sob escaped her lips. Oh my God, she breathed, her eyes filling with tears. How could you, Leo? How could you do this to us? Leo's face crumpled with remorse, but it was too little, too late. The damage had been done, and there was no going back. As Sarah dissolved into tears, clutching her child to her chest, I felt a strange sense of vindication wash over me. Leo's web of lies had finally caught up to him, and he was left to face the consequences of his actions, alone. The room was deathly silent, save for Sarah's muffled sobs as she clutched her newborn son to her chest. Leo stood frozen, his face a mask of anguish and guilt, as the weight of his lies finally came crashing down upon him. Sarah, he began, his voice cracking with emotion. I never meant to hurt you. I love you and our son. You have to believe me. Sarah lifted her head, her eyes blazing with a mixture of heartbreak and fury. How can I believe anything you say, Leo? You've been lying to me this entire time, carrying on affairs with God knows how many other women." Leo flinched as if he'd been struck, but Sarah wasn't finished. "Was any of it real?" she demanded, her voice rising in pitch. "Or was I just another notch on your bedpost, another conquest to stroke your ego?" Leo shook his head vehemently, his eyes pleading with her to understand. "No, Sarah, it wasn't like that. You and our son, you're everything to me. We can get past this, I swear. Just give me another chance." A bitter laugh escaped Sarah's lips, and she shook her head in disbelief. "Another chance? After all the lies, the betrayal? How can I ever trust you again, Leo?" Leo opened his mouth to respond, but I beat him to it, stepping forward with the thick envelope clutched in my hand. "You don't have to trust him, Sarah," I said, my voice steely with resolve, "because our marriage is over." Leo's gaze snapped to me, his eyes widening in shock as I held out the divorce papers towards him. "Lisa, you can't be serious," he breathed, his voice tinged with desperation. But I was deadly serious, and he could see it in my eyes. "I am serious, Leo," I said, my voice leaving no room for argument. "You've lied and cheated your way through our entire marriage, and I'm done. It's over." Leo's face crumpled, and for a moment I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. "Lisa, please," he pleaded, his voice thick with emotion. "I love you. We can work through this, I swear." But I shook my head, my resolve unwavering. "No, Leo. You had your chance, and you blew it. Now it's time for you to face the consequences of your actions." With trembling hands, Leo reached out and took the divorce papers from me, his gaze lingering on mine for a long moment. But there was no changing my mind. Not this time. As Leo clutched the papers to his chest, his shoulders slumped in defeat, I felt a sense of finality wash over me. This chapter of my life was closing, and a new one was about to begin. One without Leo's lies and betrayal weighing me down. Turning to Sarah, I met her gaze, seeing the same determination reflected in her eyes. "Sarah," I said, my voice soft but firm, "I know you're hurting, but you don't have to go through this alone. We'll get through this together, for the sake of your son." Sarah nodded, a flicker of gratitude shining through her tears. And in that moment, I knew that no matter what came next, I would be okay. Leo had made his choices, and now it was time for him to live with them. Alone. Years have passed since that fateful night when Leo's web of lies unraveled before our eyes. As I sit here reflecting on the chain of events that upended my life, I can't help but feel a sense of gratitude for the person I've become. In the aftermath of the divorce, I'll admit there were times when I wasn't sure I'd make it through. The pain of Leo's betrayal cut deeper than any wound, leaving me feeling hollow and adrift. But I refused to let his actions define me. With the support of my family and friends, I slowly but surely pieced my life back together. I threw myself into my career, channeling my energy into something positive and fulfilling. And as the days turned into months, the ache in my heart began to fade, replaced by a newfound sense of strength and resilience. As for Leo, well, let's just say karma has a way of catching up with people like him. His lies and infidelities cost him everything. His business, his fortune, even his so-called true love. Sarah eventually walked away, unable to trust him after his repeated betrayals. These days, I hear whispers of Leo drowning in legal troubles and financial ruin, a mere shadow of the man he once was. And you know what? I don't feel an ounce of pity for him. He made his bed, and now he has to lie in it, alone. But I'm not alone. Not anymore. I've built a life for myself that I can be proud of, surrounded by people who truly care about me. My friends have become my chosen family, always there to lift me up when I need it most. And then there's Sarah. After everything that happened, you'd think we'd never want to speak to each other again. But in a strange twist of fate, we found solace in our shared pain, bonding over the betrayal we both suffered at Leo's hands. Just last week, she reached out to me, asking if we could meet for coffee. I'll admit, I was hesitant at first, but something told me to give her a chance. "Lisa, I'll never be able to apologize enough for what happened," she said, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "But I want you to know how truly sorry I am for the role I played in all of this." As I looked at her, cradling her son in her arms, I saw a woman who had been through hell and back, just like me. And in that moment, I knew that holding on to anger and resentment would only poison my own soul. "Sarah," I said, reaching across the table to take her hand. We were both victims of Leo's lies, but we don't have to let his actions define us anymore. It's time to move forward, for both of our sakes. She nodded, a grateful smile spreading across her face as we embraced, two survivors bonded by our shared experience. These days I walk with my head held high, confident in the person I've become. The road hasn't been easy, but I've emerged from the ashes of my past, stronger, wiser, and more resilient than ever before. Leo may have tried to break me, but in the end, his betrayal only served to reveal the depths of my own inner strength. And as I step boldly into the future, I know that no matter what lies ahead, I'll be ready to face it head on, leaving the pain and heartbreak of the past behind me forever.